So there were several times we had definitely gotten shot at. Good thing there was a war going on because the Marine Corps needed pilots. We had 350 caliber rifles. Yeah, so just a quick backstory. I'll hit the rewind button. I enlisted in the Marine Corps back in 1999. Yeah, so I was living in York at the time. I'd finished up my high school degree and then was going locally to Penn State. Was sort of the kid that didn't really have an avenue to go down and figure out, right? I was sort of doing sales, doing this, and taking some classes here and there. Obviously, went and did the Parris Island thing, came back, was enlisted. That was helping out with some of the college classes because I was in the reserves at the time. And then 9/11 hit, right? Yeah. So that was sort of like a call to duty. I was sort of a lost cause at that point. Not lost cause. I just didn't have any direct. I should say direction going for me. So I figured. My dad flew privately a little bit when he was younger and still did at the time. I was always interested in aviation, so I was working full time, still doing my reserve gig with the Marine Corps, taking some college classes. Then drove up one day to Williamsport and went to the officer recruiter there, came home, found out there were some flight contracts available.
Really?
And funny, the story goes, our reserve unit that week, if I can remember correctly, I just had a drill weekend, and our reserve unit was going to get deployed over to Iraq to serve. This was post 9/11. And sort of in the same interim, I had been exploring this flight contract and going active duty from the reserves. So I sat down. I'd have dinner with my folks every Sunday night because I was living close by. So I went over there, sat down at the dinner table, and broke the news to Mom and Dad and said, well, this is option A.
Yeah.
I'm either going to deploy for the summer and I'll be back in 6 to 7 months. Option B, I'm going to go active duty and join the Marine Corps full time.
What'd they say to that?
Yeah, Dad was like, yes. Attaboy.
Yeah.
Mom was like, whoa. That was a lot coming at her at once in a big drop. So needless to say, I would say dinner didn't really end off that well that evening. So, which was fine. You had to break the ice at some point.
For sure.
But it all worked out. And then fast forward, so you go, what you end up doing is you can do a 2 5-week program or 1 10-week program as you're going through your college classes or when you graduate. So I went down to Quantico, Virginia that summer. Knocked out the 10-week program and had still another semester left at Penn State York. Got my commissioning after I graduated college. Had a big to-do ceremony at our parents' place. Had my grandfather up. He was a not retired Marine, but he served in World War II.
Gotcha.
Marine veteran. So they do there is when you get commissioned, you have individual gives an officer his first salute. Yeah. You give him a coin. So it was very cool that he was able to make his way up from Florida to do that.
No way.
So that worked out pretty cool.
That's really neat.
So that started the road. I went down, departed, went back down to Quantico, and you go through the basic school, which is about a 3 to 4 month program where every Marine officer becomes not an infantry officer, but basically learns the trades and the skills and the customs and courtesies. So if you happen to be that said pilot and you have to fall back into an infantry type position or a logistical type position, you can sort of lead said Marines or a group of Marines. So
really?
You're establish that ability, and they teach you the customs, courtesy, and leadership traits of the Marine Corps.
Gotcha.
So you do that for several months, and then you get to go down to Pensacola, beautiful Pensacola, Florida, to start your flight school career. So I was happy to be down there, blue skies.
Yeah.
We were just down there a few weeks ago for the Blue Angels homecoming show, which was pretty cool to see.
Sweet.
Yeah, we saw the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds. I hadn't seen both of them together.
Yeah.
But they do their homecoming show in November. That's the last CO show, and then you get a new crop of Blue Angel pilots, and they start training. So moved down there. I thought I was going to be a Blue Angel at one point. I was like, sky's the limit. No big deal. I got this thing.
How old were you at the time?
I would have been 24 or 25.
Okay.
So I was a late bloomer, right? Because I was sort of taking classes here and there through Penn State, was working full time. I like to tell people I got my 4-year degree in 8 years. It took me a little while, which was all good. It just took me a little longer than some to sort of figure out the correct avenue that I wanted to go down.
What were you in school for?
Business management,
Business,
marketing.
really?
Yeah. I was just sort of plugging along, doing my, first couple of years there, and then I just ended up finishing with a general business of science,
Gotcha.
marketing, and I do like talking to people. I like getting out there interacting, so I thought it fit pretty well.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So were you able to finish your degree and everything and then go to the military? Okay.
Yeah, so I did so my initial enlistment, went to Parris Island, came back. I was an enlisted, doing my 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. And then once I was back, I started doing my college courses, slowly but surely finished that out. And once you can't become a commissioned officer until you have a college degree.
Oh, really?
So
I didn't
you
know
can become
that.
a warrant officer, say in the Army, and the Marine Corps used to have that program. But in the military, at least the way it was 20-some years ago, you get your college degree, and then you can become a commissioned officer in the Marine Corps. So that's how that worked out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Is that your transition into the military? Like, when were you actually active duty? And what do you do when you're not active duty? Like, when you're just enlisted, like you said?
Yeah, so the reserves, you train, you end up going, so initially I went into the reserves, right?
Yep.
So I had to go to Parris Island for 13 weeks, do the whole boot camp, Yellow Footprints.
How was that?
It was awesome.
Yeah?
Looking back on it, I compare it. So I sort of did boot camp twice. You do Parris Island initially, which is the one you see on whatever, Full Metal Jacket, if you've ever seen that movie. And it was an eye-opener, and it was I was brought up in a pretty strict household.
Yeah.
So I feel like I can thank my parents for a little bit of heads up on how to follow orders appropriately and have a little bit of discipline. I would say that was more mentally challenging at the beginning.
Okay.
And through the 13 weeks. And then I went through another boot camp when I did the 10-week officer candidate school, basically. It's not at Parris Island, it's in Quantico. That was more physically demanding because I knew the tricks of the drill instructors were going to play with me the second time around.
Gotcha.
But Parris Island was, I'd say, looking back on it, it was awesome. At the time, it was not so much fun. But, we had people trying to escape the island once or twice. We got there in January. There was even snow down in South Carolina, and one night, said individual in our platoon decided he was going to try and run off the island. Well, next morning, he was back in the barracks, but he was ready to go to the other company just to sort of hang out and say thank you for the try and head on down the road. So, but that was a very neat experience.
So it's a bit of an oxymoron where they call it Parris Island.
Yeah, oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It is beautiful, but during the summer months, but I'd rather be a visitor and not a recruit down there. So, but that was very cool. But then we ended up going to Pensacola just to pick it up from there. You start your flight school training, and you do a ground school for a few months. Everything was rocking and rolling. I was doing well, and then I went up to Eden, Oklahoma, because the Air Force, the Marine Corps, used to do some swapping and joint training. So,
what's that?
So basically, you do flight school can be about up to 2 years long with the ground school and what they call primary. And primary is the first evolution of flight school, so everybody goes to fly an airplane. At that time, it was the T-6 Texan II. And you go and you establish a criteria and how you perform. You get graded on how you sort of accumulate the knowledge and how you perform in the aircraft. It's just like a competition per se. So you see how well you do in what they call primary, which is flying airplanes. So after that initial set of maybe 5, 6, 7 months, depending, maybe sometimes 8 months, you finish out there, and based on your aggregate score, how you scored out, and based on the needs of the military, and based on what you put down on your dream sheet. So if you're the number 1 or number 2 guy, guess what? You're probably getting whatever you want.
Yeah.
If you're the bottom of the barrel, or if you're struggling, I was still grasping onto the wicks of the airplane at the tail end because I really had a good handle on the knowledge. Going through. But for some reason, there's a lot of different components, right? You can have the knowledge and can be wicked smart, but the hand-eye coordination, the situational awareness, the task management as far as talking on the radio, knowing where you're at while you're wearing a G-suit with an oxygen mask and a flight suit and a vest, and you're turning and burning, and you're doing aerobatics. It can be a little bit challenging, and that challenge hit me pretty hard about maybe halfway through primary. So there was times, and I joked to people, 20-some years later, good thing there was a war going on because the Marine Corps needed pilots. So for me, it was like, well, yeah, you're probably not getting jets.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to be, I would have been my first pick, but I didn't even have that option. So that's fine. No big deal. But it all worked out for the best because I ended up picking helicopters. So after you finish primary, you go to jet school, you go to C-130 school, or you go to helicopter school. And that's called advanced.
Okay.
So I returned back to Pensacola. Milton, Florida is where they do TH-57, which is your initial helicopter that you fly.
Okay.
And that's about another 6 to 7 months.
What type of helicopter is that?
Think of it as a news chopper.
Okay.
All right.
Yep.
So just a direct correlation, nothing to the extent of Lifeline or what they fly or the big Chinooks that you see flying around here.
Gotcha.
This is your baby little helicopter. Very simple. You just learning the basics. Again, it hadn't clicked yet. I was able to get out of primary, got to advanced, was still struggling a little bit. Had my challenges, had some pretty good mentors that got me through what I needed to get through. And again, thank goodness there was a war going on because the Marine Corps still needed pilots at that point.
Yeah.
So I ended up finishing out, got my wings, selected the CH-53 Echo Super Stallion, which is the largest military helicopter in the military fleet. In the Marine Corps, specifically, it's larger than the CH-47 Chinook that you may see flying around here. As a brand new, had a lifting capacity back in the day between 30 to 36,000 pounds. Is 100 feet long.
So that's a cargo chopper.
It's cargo, yeah.
Okay.
Or a troop insert extract.
Gotcha.
Or, we're putting beans, bullets, and Band-Aids inside, or we're strapping them to the bottom of the helicopter and delivering that kind of stuff.
No way.
Yeah, and we'll do aerial refueling, so we'll park up behind a C-130, and you can see videos online where there's a probe that comes out of the front of the helicopter, and you plug into the basket.
No way you do that.
Yeah. So
that was cool.
That was some of the most challenging flying there.
Yeah.
So, but as soon as I got to my training squadron to fly that 53, went out to SEER school, which was an experience. So SEER school was pretty neat. Either do it out on the West Coast or up in the Northeast. Came back, started my training, and it all sort of clicked. So I don't know why it clicked, but everything came together.
Yeah.
Finished up my training there, and then went right into my first, what they call fleet squadron. That's where you're basically, at that point, you're ready to deploy, start training through all your different scenarios, qualifications. And again, they were getting ready to set out they had already had a deployment out over to Afghanistan and Iraq, rotating out through, so we knew our ticket was coming up. And then, within that first 4 years, I did 3 deployments, 2 to Africa, the Horn of Africa, and a place called Djibouti.
Really? Yeah.
That was the second 2. The first one was to Afghanistan in the 2009-2010 time frame. So
no way.
That was a combat. And that was, it's not like you want to go fight in a war.
Yeah.
But I did all this training, so let's go ahead and utilize it. So that was definitely, that tour and the initial tour in Afghanistan was the most gratifying because I was supporting the Marines on the deck right off the bat, right out of my training.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is wicked. This is cool. This is what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the subsequent tours, we're still supporting more of a humanitarian mission, but we are also supporting some other assets and personnel that were on site there in the Horn of Africa that were downrange and like over across the sea in Yemen or in Ethiopia and areas of that.
And what time frame would have that been in?
Yeah, so that would have been, I was initially finished up 2009 to 2013 would have been my deployment. So 9 into 10 was Afghanistan. Turned right around after that deployment. I think 6 months later, maybe 8 months, I was right back out the door to Africa. Did return back and went to another schooling out in Arizona, and then that was about a 2-month schooling, weapons and tactics school out in Yuma, Arizona. Came back and then went back over to Africa.
Yeah.
And then did my final deployment there, and then it was either I was going to. You can put in for a couple different options. I ended up requesting and putting in a package for Marine Helicopter Squadron 1, which is based out of Quantico, Virginia. Or you could have come back and either stayed with that fleet squadron for a little while longer, could have gone down to flight school and become an instructor, could have gone and become a ground officer and been an aero, coordinated some fire support there. But I put my application in and then returned from that deployment, finished out, and then got accepted into HMX-1, which is the Marine Experimental Squadron down in Quantico, Virginia, or Marine 1, which is where you fly the President of the United States.
Yeah.
So,
man.
That was neat.
So with that, what is... Okay, as a person who has not been in the military, you see these movies, they hype you up so much, but what's your mental state going into the thing where I'm assuming like all guys baseline relatively the same instincts. They think that stuff's awesome. They love blowing stuff up, but also too, you have the sobering aspect of war.
Mm-hmm.
And like, how does that mentally mesh in your brain?
Yeah.
Like what's going through your head? Like you were just support. So you weren't actually the one gunning. For lack of a better term, I'm going to say gunning people down. Correct?
No. You're exact. That's
okay.
110% correct. So, yeah, in the 53 Echo, I'm not firing rockets. I'm not firing machine guns. Now, we had 350 caliber rifles, and one was loaded out the left window, one was loaded out the right window, one was loaded out.
So
mounted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had 3 crew chiefs and an aerial observer, or 2 crew chiefs and an aerial observer. So we could clear them to engage targets. If we happen to get into it. But yeah, we were sort of the big, what did they used to refer to us as? The big elephant or something like that, because we were the big gray helicopter coming in while we would have support from Cobras and Hueys.
Gotcha.
So it's a little bit, unnerving at the time, but most of the times we're doing those high-risk missions. We're flying in the middle of the night on night vision goggles, and in there it's a very dusty environment.
So you're flying with night vision?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Really? I didn't know. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's a key, and we still do. We do it Lifeline as well.
Really?
Still. We have sets of night vision goggles because we're 24/7, 365.
No way.
There was a time and day that they did not fly with night vision goggles, and they just used large spotlights. And we still have people on staff currently that remember those days, and they tell us the stories, and I go, "You did what?" So that was neat. So we utilized night vision goggles there. We also had a FLIR in the helicopter as well too, which was pretty neat. Heat sensor there. But at the time, your mental state. Being a new guy, I was a co-pilot. I was there to sort of help out the pilot in command initially, make radio calls, fly the helicopter at the same time. But he was in charge of the aircraft.
Okay.
So sometimes you'd just be sitting on your hands. Sometimes you'd be gainfully employed. If there was a situation where what they call brownout, you get into a dusty LZ, nothing can be seen basically. You may have reference on your side. You take the controls, you land the helicopter, or you lift yourself back off, or you're calling them forward, back, left, right when you're picking up external loads from submarines on the deck. So there's a lot of responsibility. A lot of what's going on is there's a lot of laundry list items going on. So you don't have a lot of time to sort of worry about what's taking place on the outside necessarily, but until you get shot at. So there were several times we had definitely gotten shot at. One time we took rounds up through the middle. I joke, my left pinky to my left foot, it was, half a centimeter away from being blown
right up
off
through the deck.
7.63 round. So that came through. It didn't damage the helicopter to the state that we had to land, do an emergency landing. But they pulled out the few rounds that made its way through, so that was a little eye opening.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, this is cool in wartime. I got the ammo to prove it. But then there's other situations where we were dropping off an external load to there was a big reservoir dam called the Kajaki Dam. It was in northern Afghanistan, and we were over top of the water, and all of a sudden our hydraulic line. At the head of the helicopter, something snapped and all the hydraulic fluid was coming out, so we had to do an emergency landing. But the closest point, the LZ that we were going to land at, was fouled, and we couldn't get in there yet because the load was there, so we couldn't safely land there. So we peeled off to the left and landed over what they considered enemy territory with a lot of known mine areas. They had a lot of enemies over there. So we landed there. We were there for probably 3 or 4 hours. We had Cobras and F-18 circling on top just as Overwatch. So that was there. When it starts to drag out a little bit, and your helicopter that comes in to fly your replacement part and brings the wrong part and has to go another 45 minutes back to the base and return. So an hour and a half down the road, you're going, okay, we're still sitting here. But anyways, long story short, there's a lot of mental anguish that can sort of take place, and more of that I would say is when you miss your family, or if you have wife and kids at the time. Mom and dad, missing home, that type of thing, because you don't appreciate what you have until you miss it. I like to, not to get too, talk, preachy here, but there's a lot to be said when you get over there. It's a third world country, and you sort of learn to grow and appreciate what we have here in the United States. So.
Oh yeah, man, and especially, I think I can say this with confidence because I am this generation. We're just entitled.
Yeah.
Like we're 100. we feel this entitlement. And I think I was literally thinking of this today. It's so funny you brought that up. That I think now with media and like YouTube, and you see how quick people can get famous, and you see how quick they can make it, and you're like, oh, I'm not that much different than them. Well, I should deserve this too. And it's like, no, like you shouldn't. But I feel like, and that's 100% creeped into my life, just because I've grown up with this stuff, and it's then you actually get over to a place where they are actually oppressed, and it's like, whoa,
whole different world.
Yeah,
it's very if you can get it too, you don't want to get too serious about it, but it's about accountability and hard work anymore, and hopefully you start to see that again, because I think there's a little bit more appreciation for a little bit more accountability that needs to take place.
Yeah,
so we can realize, because you do have a large influx of a population that was definitely that is oppressed. It comes from third world countries, and they want to come to the United States. Why do they want to come to the United States? Because there's jobs here to work. So there's a lot of opportunity here. So I hate for us to squander that. So I always like to, and that's why I have an appreciation, especially flying with Life Flying and sort of doing that civic duty and continuing on that trade or that craft, because there's a lot of less fortunate people out there that just need a hand once in a while. So
no, that 100% makes sense. With that, like, how were you? I'm assuming, like, you were stationed over in Africa.
Yep.
And then what is, like, how many flights are you actually flying? Like, are you flying every week, or how many are you actually doing?
You'd be in Afghanistan. You were on a rotation, so you'd be on day rotation for X amount of months or X amount of weeks. Then you shift to a night rotation. Usually in that sequence in Afghanistan, you'd be going out and resupplying. So you may be flying for 2 hours. You may be flying for 7 or 8 hours.
Gotcha.
During your shift. In Africa, we were there as a standby mission. We were there for if bad things took place downrange. So most of our flying there was training, and we work with Air Force PJs there to support and practice and train to a certain type of mission. So there, depending on if you were a newer pilot, if you needed certain qualifications, you had the ability to sort of go out and train every day. So usually you'd be going out and flying once a day.
Oh,
but
wow.
Not to the extent that you'd be flying on an actual wartime active duty deployment. So there's a lot of training opportunity, and that's where, to be honest, that's some of the darkest environment I've ever flown in the Horn of Africa, as far as doing the aerial refueling and landing out in some of those zones. So very good training out there, very challenging flying, but you knew it was just training. You knew the enemy wasn't after you at that stage.
So you're in a safe location where you can. Okay, gotcha.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, safe to the point where the base is safe. You go outside of the gates, you definitely want to have an escort. It is a third world country, a lot of depressed people, and then as you sort of in the areas that we sort of fly around, it's not like you want to set down the aircraft, get out, and go say hello to everybody. Sightseeing, unless you know it's a safe area.
Yeah.
So, but overall, it was a very safe area.
Gotcha.
Absolutely. So,
okay. Yeah. Interesting. So when you're not, like, what is your day on base, like when you're actually at the base? Like, what does that look like?
Yep.
Like,
so,
the movies just show guys are pumping iron, getting shredded.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
I use deployments as a weight loss metric.
Yeah.
For me. I mean, I thought I was in pretty good shape as a Marine. Every Marine should hopefully be in pretty decent shape.
Yeah.
So in Afghanistan, it was a very austere environment initially because they had just set up the base over there. It was Camp Bastion. We were still in tents, so we got there in January.
Bryce, I don't mean to cut you off. Just put your mic a hair closer.
Sorry.
Nope, you're good, buddy.
We got there in January in Afghanistan, and it was cold. There was some snow. Still pop-up tents, space heaters. So there it was just you get yourself into a daily regiment. You get yourself into a daily routine. Wake up. Go to the stand up, the makeshift heads or facilities, get yourself cleaned up, do a shave, get on the bus that was taking you up to the flight line, go in, get your cup of coffee, get your morning briefing for the day, and get out on your mission, come back, go hit the rack. If it was a long flight, you'd go hit the rack for a while, come back, rinse and repeat. So that's sort of a groundhog day.
Gotcha.
In Africa, a little bit different, a little bit more engaging because there was different training evolutions that we could do, but I still had my daily regimen. I would get up every morning. I would go and not work out in the mornings. I would save that until the evening. I'd go get my staple breakfast for the morning because I had myself on a diet. Then I'd get into the office, and then I would see what the plan of the action was for the day, either do some training with some other Marines or some other aviators, or I'd be getting initially on my first deployment, I was the one receiving the training.
Okay.
And then on the subsequent one to Africa, I'd be the one giving the training.
Cool.
So a lot of different flying there. And then, I would work out religiously every evening and then just hit the rack and just rinse and repeat.
Nice.
It's really a Groundhog's Day, and there's not a lot of excitement. You get a lot of reading done, and most reading I ever usually do. And it's nothing, at that point I'm studying a lot for some additional qualifications that are taking place. So
you're not reading fiction, just
that's
like
right.
Harry Potter or something.
That's right.
Like
No,
that.
not a lot of Harry Potter, but it was good. And you just sort of get yourself into a routine to get yourself through the 6, 7, 8 month deployments. So it's not too bad. So
what would you say? Okay, a little backstory on me. I get very motivated and I will go 110%, but the discipline, trying to build my discipline because I lack discipline like crazy. I feel like I've made this example before. So my brother, which I work for, he's 5 years older than me, 6 years. No, he'd be 8 years older than me. From him to me, a huge difference in just self-motivation, like a way more go-get-it-done mentality, and just like, hey, this needs to happen. He's got the resilience, the tenacity to make it happen. The dude is awesome. Then you even take a smaller gap from, I'm 26. In our company, we hired on about a 21-year-old, and that was even more exponential in less time of where he's just like, meh. Like, I don't care. Like, just didn't have that go-getter mentality. Sure. And I feel like as the society continues to get younger, and not everyone, but the overall, you don't have. There's a saying back when men were men that's for a reason.
Yes.
And I feel like the military, which correct me if I'm wrong, but does a very good job of instilling that, where it's just like, yes, hey, nothing's all that grand or glorious, but it just needs to get done.
That's correct.
And it's not about the praise. And maybe that's what it is, because now everyone's filming. It's instant gratification. You can get praise immediately. And it's like, life is not this instant gratification. It's you do the same thing on repeat day in and day out. And that the habits and the characteristics you build from that is the reward, not that someone filmed you and you got a couple clicks on YouTube.
You are tracking right, and that's great to hear. I'm 45, you're 26 years old, so it's good to hear an individual of said age to recognize that, appreciate that, but also to be able to recognize the work ethic, obviously, of your older brother, but the lack of work ethic in some of the younger generation. But you're 110% correct about this whole instant gratification of individuals in today's society, right? There is no appreciation for the work that went behind said person becoming a doctor, said person becoming a plumber, said person becoming an electrician, said person becoming a pilot. Yeah. Everyone thinks, no big deal. I could do that. Yeah. No big deal. Not a big deal. So that's the frustrating part.
Yeah.
And I think in the military, in most branches, you get to see what a third world country is and what the things that we're blessed with here in the United States of America.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, you wouldn't want to say you would have a mandatory obligation to go serve 2 or 4 years, but there might be some good benefit to that.
For sure.
Just for some real eye-opening, even with my own children nowadays, a lot of times they think, immediate gratification. And sometimes I just want to say, I just want you to go to the children's hospital with me here and sort of see what is an individual struggling at the time. Or I want you to go on a trip with me overseas, or just somewhere downtown into a city and work a food bank or something like that, and just sort of have an eye-opening experience for said individuals. And I think if we had more of that across some of these younger generations, they can appreciate what it takes to become successful and not take for granted the things that are basically given to them right now. So
and I feel like that's even something I love media. I love technology because I've grown up with it. But at the same time, I do see the downfalls of it. And it's weird because it's like I'm pulled between two camps. I'm not that old school guy that just can get anything done. But I also see like, and then I can just play video games for 8 hours some days. Hate to say it, but I do. And then it's like, it's that weird pull of like, you got a foot in both camps. And you see the good, but then you also see the negative. But then, yeah, you look at an older generation, it's like there's 100% some good that technology brought that maybe they're not grasping onto. But yeah, overall, just the lack of motivation and just for me, work ethic's a huge thing, and it's just like because that is life. Like it's just how you function in life and how you go about it, how you handle your problems. And I keep using this quote. I don't even know who said it, but it's great. It said, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Cool.
And so then I'm like, well, dang, I'm doing the one thing kind of bad. So that if you use that logic, then you're doing everything relatively bad. So it's like, okay, well, now I need to work on the small things. And 100% trying to, grow and learn in that. But I think that's something where a lot of times in maybe civilian life, you can just give yourself the excuse. Mm-hmm. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in the military, it's like you don't get that excuse.
No, you don't. I mean, I've been out a few years now, but you want to stay mission focused at all times, right? Because to your left and your right is your fellow soldier, airman, Marine, sailor, Coast Guardsman, and they could be relying on you to watch out for them to ensure that they go home safely at the end of the day, either A, because they have family, wife, kids, or whoever back at their home. So, but I think you're absolutely right. I mean, even like, you talk about the media aspect. I think this platform, what you're doing is really impactful. Yeah. And you saw the impact of it recently with a lot of the election and everything else going on. So because we can sit down and have a conversation, it's not being influenced by another individual sitting necessarily next to me, or it's not being influenced by mom and dad corporate leader on top, right? Because we're just you and I having a conversation. We could sit here for hours and have a conversation, agree to disagree, or agree on everything, or disagree on everything. Yeah. But we're relaxed. We're having a conversation. We're having a time. And that's what it really needs to get back down to. You need to respect an individual's opinions, have a healthy conversation, but be able to walk away and just sort of appreciate like the conversation that you have with that individual. So I think it's kudos to you for doing this whole podcast.
I appreciate it. I love doing it. When Glenn came on, he said something to me that I didn't even register. He said, when's the last time you sat down with someone? And his episode was like an hour and a half, and he said, you had an undivided conversation where you weren't on your phone. Right. And I never thought of it like that because it's like we're recording it, and I was like, oh yeah, there's so much media here, but it's like, oh yeah, it's a truly undistracted conversation. Sure. And that was like really cool to me and eye-opening. I was like, oh yeah, this is neat because nowhere else you have that much of someone's time, and it just makes me grateful for the people that come on because it's like it also kept me accountable where it's like, whoa, some of these people I'm taking 3 hours of their time. Mm-hmm. I darn well better make it worth it and actually have a good conversation that is uplifting, not in the fact where it's like praise be and everyone agrees and there's butterflies and rainbows, but that it's just like you're engaging. You're having that
it's the human interaction.
Yeah.
It's man, if we could get back to more human interaction, we would be such a more productive society.
Oh, I know.
It's just a matter of relationship building because so much of it has been, yes, it is social media. And yes, we're using it and that's fine. But we're having a conversation, and so much has been led to this distraction of our devices that it has sucked us into this hole of immediate gratification. Oh, Susie, John, or Bill has this life. It's miraculous because
Bill always has
they just had
life.
That photo on there, and you're thinking to yourself, all right, realization here. Let's go ahead and knock it out. But anyways. So.
It is. And you can trick yourself so easily where it's like you see one photo and you're like, their whole life's perfect.
Correct.
And then there was this, I forget who this was. Oh, it was my one buddy up here. Just a normal run-of-the-mill guy. He's one of the farmer. Very good-looking family, though. Like him and his wife, rock stars. And they posted a picture to Instagram, and they were all smiles. I was chatting with him later, and he's like, dude, he said, we were pissed at each other in this photo. He said, we just had a huge argument. Kids weren't cooperating.
Yeah.
It was so funny because it was such a humbling experience where it's like, yes, like what you throw out there and you can slap up, you can fool people.
Absolutely.
But he's like, dude, we were so ticked at each other. I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's so true. Absolutely true. So yeah, so bless you for being.
Thanks,
and
I
doing
appreciate
this
it. Yeah,
platform. I think that's
it's a
awesome,
blast.
so.
And my thing too is, it's cool because yes, I'm doing it as, if you want to use the word platform. But I would have never been able to talk to you. And I get so many other people's experiences where I would have never had the chance to do that. And that's the super cool thing.
Yes.
And one person will refer another person. And like, then you just get a plethora of people on where you wouldn't have had. And I think that is the benefit of technology because you couldn't have talked to all those people.
Right.
Like, you have your little town and you can get to this radius. The benefit of social media, you have a larger audience.
Mm-hmm.
Also a negative thing because everyone thinks their opinion matters and sometimes they just don't. So it's that balance. Everything's that balance, but
yes.
It's so fun and I love
my most enjoyable thing is I always grew up listening to talk radio, and I think the podcast is basically an offshoot of talk radio.
Mm-hmm.
So I always listened to Rush Limbaugh for so many years. Still, every morning I listen to certain local AM stations just for the talk radio because it's refreshing conversation. You're not in it, but you get to hear people talking, which you can appreciate because sometimes when you get to your job, it's not that exciting. You don't get to interact, so you're like, well, I can live vicariously through the people having the conversation on the talk radio. So,
absolutely,
podcast is a good offshoot for that too. So,
are you a big podcast listener?
I wouldn't, so I go, I listen to Tucker Carlson Network, has that new network out there. Yeah. So he's not necessarily a podcast. He'll do interviews, 1-2 hour interviews. So I really enjoy that. There's another one I listen to is Victor Davis Hanson. So I'm a pretty big political junkie.
Really?
I think there's some value to that. I don't necessarily enjoy or appreciate. I do think, just getting into politics, there's a lot that in my humble opinion, is wrong with politics. But I think it's good to have a little bit of wherewithal and knowledge of politics, who's controlling the money in society, and because you pay so much towards that situation. So I like to stay abreast of that. And it's really how I was brought up as far as talk radio is concerned.
Gotcha.
Megyn Kelly has a good YouTube /podcast. So most of them are talk radio related. Yeah. Haven't gotten into, I've listened to a couple of the big one, the Joe Rogan type podcast. But I really just listened to the Donald Trump and the J.D. Vance interviews. Oh yeah, which are all very entertaining. So,
for sure.
So those are the big heavy ones that I listen to.
Do you ever listen to Jocko Willink?
I've heard him, and I've heard him recommended several times. So I may have to try that one.
Is there he was a Navy SEAL? Do you know any of his backstory?
I don't necessarily,
dude. So he has a book called Extreme Ownership.
Okay.
And I just started it again. Listen to the whole thing, and it talks about his premise of everything. He was a leader in the Navy SEALs, and just how if you are a leader, no matter what goes wrong, you're a crew member underneath you makes a mistake. At the end of the day, it is all your fault. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you are the one to blame. And he's like, so then he took this format and his stories from he was in what was the town name? Ramadi?
Yeah, Ramadi.
Ramadi, yes. Yep. Ramadi. So he was over in Ramadi, active duty, so he gives all these war stories and the lessons he learned being a commander over there, and then also applies them to business. So that now he's come back and helped people with their businesses. And the dude's he is your pinnacle of that is a man. That is a man.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's intelligent, but he's also an absolute bull.
And that's okay.
Yeah, it's awesome.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I think that's the best combo.
But the stigmatism is there's something wrong with that, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like you go out, right. And you're like, come on, I'm a guy, you're a woman. It's okay. Yeah. That's how God created us. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't want to get too religious or talkful about that, but I mean that's just the way it was all made.
That's how it was.
Is how we all sort of got established here. So,
and that's what Peterson says. He says the best men are not men that are incapable of doing horrible things. They're the ones that are capable of doing horrible things but have the restraint not to.
That's good.
And it's Oh man, that's why you're so smart. Like,
Yeah.
the dude's incredible. But yeah,
I'll have to pick that up. Yeah.
With Jocko, the guy is just like, he's into jujitsu, but super intelligent. Now he kind of started his own brand where it's like clean eating, and like American made stuff, and just like an all around. I feel like you would 100% enjoy his message.
Yeah, the clean eating's making a movement, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh my word, it's so trendy.
That's like a big
now.
topic right now.
Yeah. Well, and now I think everyone's so. We lost trust in mainstream health a little bit. We lost.
For sure.
I feel like a lot of people are starting to question, like, okay, is my doctor, what he's actually prescribing me, the best thing for me? And I think, I do think it's a good thing, because for a long time, I think we just took what an expert said, and I'm not outing experts and saying you shouldn't listen to them. But what happened was we weren't doing any thinking for ourselves.
That's correct.
And we're still, quite frankly, my generation, we're still not thinking for ourselves. We're just sheep at the end of the day. But I think now with trends, there are good trends that come about. And I think with the whole clean eating getting more trendy, it's allowing people to actually do some digging for themselves. And my wife is like, I'm one where I will not research a thing, and I'll just pick something and I'll stick with it. So she's one where she'll research everything out. So since we've gotten married, my eating is definitely cleaned up. Like, she's like, no, we're not eating this. Seed oils are bad for you. Like, all this stuff. But she has the evidence to back it. It's not like she's just out there throwing around willy-nilly claims. We were making our own dish soap for a while. Like, it got crazy. But yeah, it's cool.
There's a lot of full circle, right? A lot of the things that you were told forever, butters and meats, and they're all bad, and they're going to block your arteries. Yeah. And what do we come to find out? It's sort of a little polar opposite. So it's okay to ask.
Yeah, and I think the thing that trips people up, and then you can go into the conspiracy theory. I don't actually believe this, but it would be fun to believe if, like, you have like industry plants. Right. So did you ever hear that guy, the Liver King?
No.
Dude, some social media guy, jacked out of his mind, just absolutely shredded, 100% doing steroids. Yeah. Claims he's completely natural, and how he's so jacked is he went back to the ancestral tenets of eating raw meat. So the dude's just like popping deer nuts into his mouth. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, that's not giving you a six-pack. You're shooting TRT right into your thigh. So you have people like that where I feel like discredit some of the actual, like, there's a slight amount of truth to a very large lie of what he's doing. Right. And then everyone's like, oh, well, no clean eating's actually like that healthy. Like, this guy's just a fake. Sure. So you have like those type of people that like discredit it. But then I also feel like you have that on the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, there are doctors out there that are doing very well. But then, yeah, you have some people where maybe they're just doing it for the money. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's an industry. It's expensive to eat clean. Yeah, 100%. Right? You know, like, you go to it's expensive enough to go to the grocery store just to buy regular stuff. To eat clean stuff is super expensive. But man, I tell you what, with a 6 and an 8-year-old, I'm definitely more conscious because it's sort of a topic that's been hot for a while. And, you know, we live out on a couple acres, you know, out in the country a little bit, and we sort of appreciate, you know, growing. My wife has a nice garden. We grow things throughout the summer, so we get to eat that kind of stuff. And we started buying, you know, fresh, you know, cow, you know, we got half a pig this year and stuff like that. So you can taste the difference. I'm sorry to tell you, it's not just a mental thing. Like, you can see, like, when I get the chicken from the Amish down the road, the chicken breast that comes out isn't like the size of my head. You know, it's like a chicken breast size, and it tastes so much better. The other ones, you get it, it's like the size of your head. And you're going, how'd that chicken get so big? That chicken was benching 220. Right. It's pretty astonishing. So I'm definitely more mindful of that, and my wife has been too, and, you know, God bless her, you know, she is very disciplined and very thoughtful, and she's been a school teacher for about 16, 17 years. That's awesome. Now. Yeah, so she just recently got on this very healthy kick diet in the last year, and she's been able to trim down a bunch of weight. No way. All through a natural means, you know, just sort of food portion and clean eating goes a long way, and we're trying to instill that into our kids, but it's tough, right? When you have busy lives, and you'll find out here, you know, when your hands get busy here in a few short months, but it's tough to not grab the bag of chips or grab a bag of pretzels.
Or, our big thing when we were, our boy loved fruit bars. And, then we finally looked on the box and we're like, man, what is going on here?
Yeah, there's a whole sugar factory in this fruit
right,
bar.
And you can dig deep and you can go conspiracy theory and a lot of that stuff. But, kids' attention spans, a lot of sugar related to all that kind of stuff. You're not full in bore believing all the things that are being said about it, but it does make you question, and it's okay to question and do your own research. So.
Yeah, I think that's the healthy thing. But I think now we got to a society, not as a whole, but I think it's the loud minority that if you question them, you no longer can even have a different opinion or you're vilified.
Right.
And I don't think that's the majority, but I think the minority is very loud. So you kind of think it is. You're like,
it's a silent majority. The silent majority, point and proven. I mean, even in just to talk this past election, right? You could go up to 20 people and say, are you voting for Trump? No, but you saw that 15 out of 20 of them may have voted for him, but they didn't want to say it because they didn't want to be stigmatized because social media comes in and plays a factor again because said person does this and passes and he supports this person. And then, Johnny and Susie are getting picked on at school. And you're like, people.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just talking and having a conversation about different opinions.
And that's a thing too, though. I think, like I saw, and this is terrible, but this is where my generation is at. We get our news from like TikTok and Instagram, which is insane. I understand that. But I seen this TikTok where it was, hey, the Amazon Echoes, a lady asked like, hey, should I vote for Donald Trump? And it's like, I can't give any da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And then it's like, should I vote for Kamala? And then it gave out a list of reasons why you should vote for Kamala. And it's like, dude, I know you sound like that right-winged conservative nut, but there is things that have big media is shifting things. Even a lot of the stuff I'll see on Instagram, if I'm scrolling through a reel or something, it's like false information. I've seen that, and it's something about the right side as agenda, and then nothing for the left, and it's just crazy. It's like, I don't want to say, hey, the whole system's corrupt and it's bad, but we're all human, dude. At my core, I'm corrupt, so there's 100% going to be corrupt people.
Yeah, we all have a level of sin within our own selves, and we're just sort of praying to the Lord that He forgives us a little bit before we make our trip upstairs. So,
so I don't know how we got on that, but
it's a good offshoot.
yeah, it is, and that's the thing. I love just going on those tangents because they're fun to talk about, but with that, okay, we kind of segued into politics, but I want to circle back with your view in politics, but then also flying the president. How's that? Or how'd you first? Let's take it back to the beginning. How did you come to get that position? Because that seems like to a person that is not in the military, that seems like a very esteemed position. Yep.
So you definitely need to have a clean background because the security clearance that they put you through is pretty high. And so you want to be clean on that point. But just like anything else, being accepted into that squadron necessarily, or that group of individuals, or hitting that benchmark, I worked very hard in that very first 4 years of my 3 deployments, got all the necessary qualifications and certifications that you basically could get as a 53 Echo pilot. So I was ready to rock and roll. Skies was the limit. I told you couldn't even get through flight school. Once I hit the squadron, boom, got all the qualifications, was a weapons and tactics instructor, which is sort of like, a squadron CO recommends 2 pilots out of the squadron, one in the fall. In the springtime, you go out and go through this school, and you're sort of the subject matter expert on your platform and how to employ your platform and tell more. Put up an application, get letters of recommendation. I happen to know my previous CO was part of Marine Helicopter Squadron 1, so he could speak on my behest. He wrote a letter of recommendation. There was 2 or 3 individuals. One was my OPSO for a little while on a deployment in Afghanistan. Another one was another OPSO. He was about a year older than me. Had both gone to that squadron. Fast forward, I had individuals there that I could speak on my behest. So basically, they get a large application pool. They pull select members to sit on a committee at Marine Helicopter Squadron 1. They do a scrub, of the applicants, letters of recommendation, pros and cons of said individuals, of if you knew this person in the fleet, if you didn't know them,
really?
what kind of individual are they, stand up, guy you can be on the road with for a while type of individual. But you still had to meet a minimum threshold for qualification, and then your clearance level as far as your background is concerned. So that's how I basically got accepted. I was over in Africa at the time. On my second tour there in Djibouti, and then got the call, and it was myself and another individual. He was senior to me by a few years, and we both got the call, and so we were accepted. So we were super excited to get back and roll on back up from. At that point, I was stationed in Wilmington or Jacksonville, North Carolina, or New River, North Carolina, which was the air station down there, Marine Corps Air Station, right next to Camp Lejeune. So it was a short move up to Quantico, and then. That was the cat's meow of my. I would say cat's meow as far as the nice living.
Yeah.
Going forward, right? I can assure you, taxpayers, that your taxpayers are being spent very wisely. No, that was very cool. So you get up there and you get to train and you go out. I learned how to fly 3 different airframes there: the CH-46 Sea Knight, the H-60. What they call the white top, because the helicopters that you see land on the South Lawn all have that white top to it. It's a H-60 white top or an H-3 white top. So three different airframes. I learned how to fly there. First year, you're just sort of learning the specific airframes. Second year, you're still either learning it, or in your progression you get signed off as an aircraft commander. In your third and fourth years, you progress into a pilot in command, and you're doing the flights with the VPs and the presidents. Cool. And you're standing some duties and stuff like that. You get to go on some very cool trips. I did 3.5 years of President Obama, and then my last 6 months was with President Trump. So very stark difference, travel arrangement. First 6 months of President Trump, he remained in the United States a lot. Yeah. Was sort of getting some stuff done here. I caught the second, 4 years of President Obama. Things were already established. He was doing a lot of world traveling, so I was able to get overseas a lot and do some very cool trips. You do some advanced trips. You go out there for a few days prior. He comes inbound. You either give him a lift somewhere from point A to point B, or you might be there for other situations where you're just assisting. But you get a couple days usually in every rotation to go out and explore. So
no way.
It's sort of cool.
That's sweet.
That was sort of the big benefit and big perk to that. But as far as politics is concerned, you're there to serve the president. Yeah. You're the office of the presidency. Whether who's in the office or not, you still got to respect the office. So that was objective 1. Yeah. And become a proficient expert in your platform, and make sure you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's on how you appropriately execute your mission, regardless of who's in the aircraft. So it was very neat. So
I'm assuming you had to sign some sort of non-disclosure, you can't. So
definitely can't. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff
you cannot say. That's awesome.
There's a plan for everything, right? So that's why I guess you could always just say that. There's definitely a plan for everything. How well the plan would be executed, I guess we'll find out. Hopefully it doesn't ever happen to ever take place. I can rest assured on this: there was never an emergency situation where we had to scoop in and do something. So something must be working well before it even got to our situation. So kudos to all the planners out there, Secret Service, all the protective details, and all the other military personnel that sort of keep us from having to come in and do anything.
Yeah. Was there any instances, and I don't even know if you can say this, but where you heard some stuff where you're like, that's kind of sweet. Yeah. That's pretty cool. I can't tell anyone.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
awesome.
You definitely get read into some situations that I
so
definitely
neat.
couldn't talk about, but things you go home at the end of the day while you're there, and you say to your wife, well, sorry, I can't just necessarily give you all the nitnoid details. So
is that tough with your marriage then?
No, my wife was
she
very
understood all that?
Absolutely
good.
Yeah, she was very on board with that kind of stuff, and she got to reap plenty of benefits from just the fact that you're part of that family at Marine Helicopter Squadron 1, because it is just a big family. You get to sort of wear that as a pride mark on your chest. You get to share that with your other family members. You get to go check out the helicopters.
That's cool.
Some good functions. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's very neat.
That's sweet, because my one buddy, his uncle did drone work for the government. Cool. And he had to park his car, and he only found this out after he was done with that position. He had to park his car. Someone would pick him up every day for work, take him to an undisclosed location, and nothing could be said of what he was doing.
That sounds a little bit more
it sounds
in depth
insane
for me.
But like something like that is like, oh, how was your day? Good. And that's like all you can give them. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But
yeah, sometimes, I mean, so I wouldn't say that it necessarily is not a strain on it, right? So a good relationship is always based off, good conversation with your wife. So I think it's a personal fault of mine. I think a lot of times I take that for granted. Like, she doesn't want to hear about that. Like, big deal, like whatever. Because I find myself to be sort of humble, but I also don't want to bore with some of the nitnoid stuff. So there is occasions every once in a while where, I have to be remind myself or be reminded by my loving wife that she enjoys a conversation every once in a while at the house.
And I feel like that's such to a just first level civilian, that is an awesome job. But when you're in that, it just becomes your job.
Your job.
And you're just like, I mean, it's whatever. And they're like, what? You're flying the like, I'm blown away.
Right.
Like, that's
I mean,
awesome.
sometimes you sit around all day, like waiting for the if you a certain, and what are you going to tell your wife when you go? Well, I sat around all day. I pay for it. I mean, sometimes that happens.
Yeah, for sure. So why? I don't know the difference of this. Why would the president take a plane versus a helicopter?
Yeah, so good question, right? So there's Air Force One or Air Force Two. Air Force One, it's only called Air Force One when the president's on board. Air Force Two when the VP's on board.
Oh,
it's
I didn't
only
know
called
that.
Marine One or Marine Two when that's the call sign that they'll utilize when the
Okay.
president or the vice president is on board. A lot of times you'll see Air Force One or said aircraft come up to Harrisburg International Airport, and they'll do practice touch and goes here because it's a good, nice, long, straight runway. Plane versus helicopter, right? So there is helicopter would be more local, and so we basically shorter runs, right? So he gets on Air Force One from Andrews Air Force Base, and he travels to California. Well, we would have, if he were going to do a lift for him, we would have had helicopters in place. So really the question would be helicopters versus motorcade.
Yeah.
That's what it came down to, because we would be tapped with making a weather call on whether or not the weather was good to fly the president of the United States at that point in time. If the weather was not good, there was always a secondary plan as far as the motorcade was concerned.
Gotcha.
So that was sort of the differentiating thing there. He's always taken a plane somewhere unless he's local in the D.C. area. Like basically you'd fly him from the White House over to Andrews or the Naval Observatory or maybe up to Walter Reed or just some other locality, up to Camp David a few times. I've been up there, which is a very cool experience. But as far as whether you're going to do an airlift for him at said site or whether he's going to go by motorcade, depends a lot on what the Secret Service plans out and the logistics and the roadways and a lot of other factors that go into it. So, yeah, that's basically the big answer there.
Gotcha.
It's not so much Air Force One versus Marine One. It would be Marine One, or is he going to go by motorcade?
Yeah, gotcha.
So, yep.
Whoa.
So that was very neat.
Yeah.
4 years of that, and then I was actually going to get out of the military at that point, and full circle. I told you about the big struggles I had in flight school, going through flight school with the Marine Corps. They needed some slots filled down in Pensacola, Florida, to become a flight instructor in the T6 Texan, which I, almost got my butt kicked out of, which I basically did, almost failed out of flight school. But again, fortunately, there was a war going on. So opportunity presented itself, and you could go down and be an instructor in the helicopter or the TH-57, which is the news chopper, or you could go be an instructor in the T6 Texan too, which is the fixed wing, fully aerobatic, G-suit, oxygen mask. Very cool aircraft, very fun aircraft. But I don't even remember how fun it was because I was too busy screwing things up in flight school 20 years prior. Not 20, whatever it was, half a dozen years prior. So I said, why don't I go down and try this whole fixed wing thing again? Because I thought, how cool would it be if I could return as my last tour, go down, be an instructor in the same aircraft that kicked my butt X amount of years ago.
Snob that thing every time you get into it.
So it was not a big deal.
That's
I
awesome.
got in there, I got it. It was no big deal. I thought this is full circle. This was very cool to come back. Mentor students that had the same struggles that I did, and see kids that had the coolest. Some kids just come in there and we're like, "You're going Jets, dude. You might be a Blue Angel someday."
Yeah.
Don't know. But the more appreciative times were the kids that were struggling. I had several times you have to get through a certain amount of aerobatic flights. I had this young Coast Guard girl flying one time, got up there. And she threw up twice, but she kept, she'd get her bag out. She threw up. You doing all right up there? Yep. She got to take the controls back. She'd go do a couple more. Threw up again. And I thought, man, good for you. That is that is pride right there. So those are the type of situations. Or a guy just might not get it yet.
Yeah.
And I just had to sort of reiterate, and I'd always resort back to my story and my career line of, hey, don't ever give up on yourself. If the military decides it's not the right place for you, let them make that decision. But at no time should you walk out of this program and turn in your commitment and just sort of quit on it.
Yeah.
Let them decide that for you, because you may not have the choice if you decide to give up an air contract necessarily on the next duty or job that you may want to do.
Gotcha.
So, and that should be said for anything in life, right? And if you're passionate about something and you think that it's the thing that you want to get after, never let don't ever give up on yourself. If the company comes to you or the organization says, thanks, have a nice day. And at that point you can move on. So life lessons.
Yeah, for sure. With that, so also the military has the stigma, I believe, of the common populace to be very firm and hard and regiment. With instructing then, did you more lead with that like iron hand, or were you a little bit more sensitive to that? Like,
no,
what's that balance?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, you definitely had it. You knew who the hammers were in the squadron as far as the instructors.
Yeah.
The pilot cadre amongst the instructors that were giving the lessons. I did not have that.
Yeah.
Now I might have. I would assume as an individual, young Marine entering flight school. They view a captain or a major or somebody that comes and there's a flight instructor like, oh boy.
Yeah.
And as a Marine, you're like, Navy, you either have the rep of being funny and a little more looser and stuff like that. And it's true. But they're still great pilots. I approached it at a different angle because I knew the struggles that they had. Now, if I knew a guy or a girl was coming unprepared, and it was obvious, and you give them a fair warning, and you try to work with them, but they continued to be unprepared. That's when you had to firm up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then that's when you have to get real with them and let them know. But for the most part, if you came well prepared, I'm there to work with you and to help you get through flight school. I'm not there to fail you out at all. So it was very eye-opening, and I, again, from a professional level, the first tour, serving the Marines on the deck during wartime was awesome. From a personal standpoint, gratification for myself was as a flight instructor down there to know I've come full circle. Now I've got a handle, and I'm serving individuals that I knew I had struggled X amount of years ago. And then we come to Lifeline, where that's probably the most gratifying occupation so far, right? Because I get to come back to where I was born and raised, serve Central Pennsylvania, and serve, fly little babies, sick babies, elderly, just the sick and the needy that need extra special care. Because I know Lifeline has a very big presence within Central Pennsylvania. It's the big blue helicopters, and they've been around for X amount since 1986. I basically have it scripted now. Now that I'm the director of flight ops, I do fly still, but it's now been resorted to PowerPoints, emails, PR events, and talking to the, which is cool. I love sharing the story of life flying because it is a very cool story.
Yeah.
I mean, just today. Our oldest aircraft in the fleet currently, November 600 Lima. It's been a workhorse. It's been around for 20-some years, since the year 2000. But, I mean, our guy today on duty, he got in on duty, started at 7 o'clock, got his first flight out at 7:30. 3 flights later, 2 to Allentown, 1 down to York, 3 newborn babies, all bringing back to the Penn State Health Children's Hospital to get, a better level care. So those are the type of things where you sort of appreciate it and sort of realize, like, things are a lot worse for Southern individuals in this world, so.
Yeah, for
Very
sure.
Yeah.
We're sitting right at an hour. Do you care if we go to an hour 30? Just
works.
I do want to touch on Lifeline. I want to go one more thing back. 2 points back to the military. With that, you then coming back around and then instructing that, was that that would just, to me, if that was me, I'd be feeling awesome. Like, was that your biggest professional accomplishment? Because that sounds huge.
Yes.
Like, that sounds huge.
Yeah, I mean, professionally and personally, right? I mean, because I can honest to God tell you, I never thought I was going to make it out of flight school initially going through there. Initially flying the T6, and it was the aircraft that I thought, man, if I just had a handle on it, I would have enjoyed it so much more. But to be able to return and instruct on that aircraft specifically, I mean, that is just some of the most fun flying.
Yeah.
It is the most fun flying I've ever done. Because, I mean, it's not a jet, but the aircraft, you can pull up to 6 to 7 Gs.
Really?
You do all the aerobatics that you see every other Blue Angel or every other aerobatic pilot do. And you're just sort of cruising around in this very cool aircraft.
Yeah.
And you get to teach a student how to do it initially. You get to learn, they learn how to fly.
I don't know if I know what it looks like. What's it called again?
It's a T6 Texan 2.
T6.
You can put U.S. Navy T6 Texan 2. So, yeah, I would say.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a good looking aircraft.
Yeah, that thing looks sharp.
Yep. So I enjoyed that mightily. And, to see the smile on kids' faces after flights was very gratifying. And on a personal prideful and level, that for me to be able to return that aircraft, because I mean, really, if I hadn't gotten past that stage of flight school, there was 2 times during initial flight school in the T6 where I had to go before the commander. I had to have flight evaluations done, but it just happened. My flights were good. Were in front of the commander, so they're like, keep on going. Yeah. But if I never got past that, I would never have had the career that I had. So to be able to go full circle and sort of espouse that knowledge and sort of that stick-to-itiveness to the younger generation was the most gratifying. Yeah,
that's awesome, because I feel like even too with today's generation, generally, obviously we still have people that are absolute rock stars.
Right.
But it's like, you don't have that many. Like, I got 4 clicks on YouTube, and then you actually hear someone that's done something, and it's like, that's awesome. And I feel like that's why we need those stories, because, as a human race, like, storytelling is what inspires change and everything. So just hearing that is awesome, and it fires me up as well. Did you ever, or how would I word this? How common is actually like getting close to crashing on an aircraft? Like when you're learning, like that's pretty uncommon, right?
Is it common? I mean, the safety barriers are there. Yeah. All the safety precautions are put in place. I mean, fortunately, in that specific aircraft, there's an ejection seat. So I always thought, well, things ain't going right. I'm out of here. I would say, I mean, I came closer to banging up an airframe or crashing on deployments or in training in the helicopters anytime more so than I did in flight school, because the precautions are all there.
Gotcha.
I mean, there was a time, in Afghanistan, there was one time where I was with a senior guy and I was still a junior guy, and we were coming into an LZ and it was all dusty and he browned out on the right seat. It was a very confined area, but I was able to take the controls. But we were probably a couple feet away talking on the radio to a HESCO barrier, banging it up and just banging up the airframe. Another example is in Africa, just out doing some training in the middle of the night. Very senior major that I was flying with at the time. I was doing my training. You get into spatial D or vertigo, so it's sort of unrecognized where you get the leans. You have to trust your instruments in the helicopter because you can track on a light out there and say, okay, that's on the horizon. Gotcha. And if you track it, but it could be a descending aircraft. It could be could be a light on the deck. Well, he was tracking in on that. I'm a very junior guy. Yeah. You had the 2 challenge rule. And I challenged him once, challenged him a second time, and even the crew chief started to pipe in. So I ripped the controls from him. Very big airframe, pitched it up about 10 degrees nose high, pulled in a ton of collective, which is basically how you increase power of the airframe. Okay. And I think we leveled out maybe at 300 feet. We had descended down from maybe 5,000 feet by the time it was all said and done. But you could hear the airframe shuddering enough. And we got back from that flight safely. Everyone shook it off. Oh, the precursor to that was I had actually gotten spatial D like 2 minutes prior. So he took the controls. What? Spatial disorientation, the vertigo, the leans. You don't recognize it, but all of a sudden you're in a 20 degrees nose down, 30 degrees right bank, angle
So you
bank.
actually don't, you've been doing it that long, you're actually not
you're
knowing
staring at an object in the middle of the night. You don't have any discernible horizon. So you think, okay, I must be fine. I'm just sort of following that guy along. And then all of a sudden your sensories in your ears start doing a little funky thing to you in your eyes. You see the light. but you realize you don't. You look down at your instruments, and you could be descending out of the sky.
And that's what was happening with you and this other gentleman.
Yeah, it happened to me. I passed him the controls. He thought, there's the senior guy. He's good.
Yeah.
And then 2 minutes later, it happened to him. So I had shaken it off by then, got the controls back. So those were the two of the closest instances, I would say, as far as potential to crashing. Knock on wood, nothing like that happened.
If you crash one of them suckers, how much does that cost in the government? Multi-million,
multi-millions.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, each component on the airframe. I mean, the blades themselves were probably several $100,000. So 7-bladed system on a helicopter. So that's a lot of money going down. So you have Class A, B, C, and D mishaps. I can't remember what the thresholds are for each one, but yeah, you're definitely going to be paying a lot of money. Not me, the taxpayer.
Yeah.
Thanks, taxpayer. Again, bailing us out.
Yeah. In that, it's good to hear, because so many times as a civilian that honestly doesn't have that much knowledge of government or anything. I feel like a lot of us, we just complain because it's easier than actually looking in and researching something. It is nice to hear, though, that like taxpayer dollars are going to stuff that is actually helping people and everything.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes you can just get in the vortex of like, the government's screwing me and like.
There's a point. There's a reason it's there,
Yeah.
which is good. I mean, that's how our nation was founded, right? Around they're there to support. I mean, obviously, there's fraud, waste, and abuse in every aspect. But I mean, as far as military training is concerned, and as far as keeping us as a safe country, I think that's a good use of taxpayer dollars.
Yeah,
absolutely, 109%.
Another question I had, which I was interested in, is with the whole movement, and I'm assuming this will fire you up, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say. The whole movement with like the defund the police, where people are now kind of raging against the people that are now protecting this nation. In that, I think it comes from a lack of education for sure, and they're not actually understanding. They're taking a glimpse of what happened and misinterpreting it. But then for the people that like have served and continue to serve, what is, as a civilian, the best way we can thank those people? Because I feel like, especially cops now, dude, their job sounds like it sucks. Not because it's a bad job, but because that many people are just giving them flack. And it's like, they're just trying to do their job, and now you just have 1,000 eyes on you watching everything you do, where it's like, if you mess up one time, you're screwed, and then you're going to have every Karen with her phone out, like, recording you.
Yeah, I just feel like people just need to be not so intimidated or timid about showing appreciation towards somebody else or towards a profession. I think professions in today's society have been watered down so much, right? So like we get sort of full circle. Guy's a police officer. He's going out every day, potentially risking his life. Yeah. Guys in the military. I mean, you can say that for everything. And then you have the flip side of individuals. Oh, I go out to work every day. I may get hit by a car. Okay, buddy, I understand it. Yeah. But this individual has made a choice to go do this and leave this as a profession, and he's not going to be a millionaire over it.
No,
I think there's
protecting a Kmart.
Exactly. I think it all goes back to the education system, right? Civic duty. We're starting to reinstill some of that proactive learning about, the security blanket that this nation provides for everybody, about the history of this country, about individuals and sacrificing the military and not putting a negative spin on it. There's always the 1, 2, 3% of every organization that are going to put a bad taste in everything. But I would say for the civilian population, just learn to have an appreciation a little bit more and do a little bit more civic duty, a little bit more participation. And please just show your gratitude. Take your face out of your phone and go up to a cop, go up to a military personnel. They've probably heard it 1,000 other times, like, thank you for your service, thank you for your patronage. But just take a couple seconds to do that. Trust me, the current things that you have going on right now probably isn't like going to end the world at this time. So just take a deep breath, take your time, have a conversation with a guy, and show a little bit of appreciation for him. Yeah.
And it is such a weird thing, especially with police, but also military men, because they are there to correct you, and obviously no one likes being corrected. As I use this hate term loosely, I hate cops when they pull me over.
Yeah, sure.
But it's like, I know I deserved it.
Right.
Like, I hate when my boss corrects me when
You're
I mess up.
mad because you got caught.
Yeah. It's like, oh, dang. So,
just like your parents when you're growing up.
Yeah,
you get away with it, and then you get caught, and you think
you.
your parents are the worst thing in the world. But
So
you're wrong.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, and I feel like so many times that's the only interactions people have with the police. So it's like, these guys suck.
I know.
Yeah.
You just have to shed light on more of the positive. It sort of circles back to the media, right? So much of the negative stuff is put out there. Let's put all the positive stuff out there. Let's talk about all the good stories of the individuals that they save, and let's highlight that type of stuff. Because I can turn on Channel 6 News right now, or WJL, whatever. I can turn it on everything, and they probably lead it with 5 negative stories. Yep. You're like, come on, people. There's got to be something positive. It's the holidays.
Yeah, but negative stories sell.
It is. It's a shame. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So... No, you just got to sort of take time to sort of show a little bit more appreciation. And it is, I do think you can sort of wear that topic out a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't overdo it, right? I do think, and I'll be, just straight out. Not everyone's a hero that served in the military. Not everyone's a hero.
Yeah.
Okay. Like Jocko, that guy was probably.
Yeah. He's the man.
He's the man, right? But don't butter it up. And again, it goes down to watering down a person's occupation. Well, now we made everything into like a hero or into an award, or we need an award for that person. Well, then we're just all the same.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the goal of certain sects of the population, where we just all need to be the same. We don't need to strive to be excellent anymore.
Yeah.
We just need to hand out awards to everybody. And so that has sort of, I think, impacted a little bit.
Because, and especially over COVID, it was like, dude, you're a hero for going out and stocking shelves. It's a job.
Now
it's what I'm supposed to do.
That's right.
I'm not doing this to be a hero. I just need money to pay rent.
You're a hero for doing that.
Yeah,
no.
Not. Yeah, I get that. That makes sense. And I feel like maybe if you just, you kind of butter it up, and then it just becomes disingenuous. And it's like, what are we doing?
And we're just using the term. It's just a word.
Yeah.
It has no meaning to it. And the military is just as guilty of this, right? I mean, they have awards for everything out there.
Really?
Sure. I mean, and you hear individual A or B or C get an award for this or that, and you wonder, being in the military, there's on certain occasions, you just had to produce the award, you had to put so much fluff into it. But it spilled over into society as well, where it's like awards for everybody. Well, it's just like the occupations now. Like it used to be, if you were like an airline pilot, you were like the cat's meow, like very cool. Now it's like viewed as like, all right, bus driver, take me to wherever point A to B I need to go. Even, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily this way, but the helicopter EMS industry has grown so big in the United States. In the state of Pennsylvania, in my personal opinion, it is oversaturated with helicopter EMS pilots.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have competitors. I mean, we do a heck of a job at Lifeline as a director of flight operations, and my predecessors did the way. We have held the standard and not, wavered off of that. We recruit to a very high threshold as far as the amount of hours, the type of experience, the individual that's coming to fly for Lifeline. Because we pride ourselves on flying in the tougher, bad weather conditions compared to some of these other platforms that fly out there. Absolutely. I'd be venture to say that the crop pilots that we have, 11 including myself, we've got close to 60,000 flight hours, almost 260 years of military service.
No way.
Right? So, and that's just among 11 individuals. But with that being said, you've got other organizations within the state, the helicopter EMS industry, that you could go to any other county almost, and there's a helicopter in there. So we try to stay on the higher level, where we treat to a higher acuity of care. Hence the 3 babies that we picked up today and brought back to the Children's Hospital. We do a lot of those flights.
Gotcha.
Our team is a lot more trained in specialty care, I would say. Our pilots are more willing to take on those challenging flights, and that's really what's going to keep us standing on top of the hill
Yeah.
in Pennsylvania as far as a flight program is concerned.
That makes sense.
Because when you oversaturate a market, which is going on in Pennsylvania right now, certain organizations have too many helicopters that they put out there. They've put out too many bases, and now they can't put enough pilots in those bases in those helicopters.
Gotcha.
Currently, the way Lifeline is postured is we've got a Hershey base, Lancaster, and Carlisle base. If we go any bigger right now, currently in the current status of the health system, we will overextend ourselves and we will not be able to fill the requirement that we committed to the community.
Gotcha.
Right now, we've got enough pilots, plus or minus, plus 2, I would say, enough medical personnel. Our radius, or where we serve, the region, we go out to Pittsburgh, we go out down to Philly, up to New York, but the majority of our stuff is here in Central Pennsylvania, up to State College, Allentown, down to York. The way we're sized right now, we're probably, I would venture to say, the most operationally efficient program in the state of Pennsylvania when it comes down to
That's
that.
awesome.
We may not produce the most numbers of volumes, and it's not necessarily like I need to go produce volume, because that means you're caring for more sick people, which is a sad thing. But I would say, compared to the other ones, we're probably just as far as the financial figure is concerned, we're probably the most efficient in the state.
No way.
So
yeah, and that I feel like that's almost the tough thing too, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not in this industry, but I think it bans across most industries. You, at your human instinct, if you're a relatively good person, obviously with sin in your life, but you're a relatively decent person, you want to help as many people as possible. But at some point, you overextend yourself, and then you're doing nothing well.
Right.
And then it's like you almost need to put confines, and it's like, no, like I can't help everyone, but the people I am going to help, I'm going to help well.
Oh, yeah. That's 110% correct, right? It's, you want to sort of, again, you have the doctors, you have the pilots, you have whatever profession, get super good at that occupation, and you are going to serve the populace so much more than you would if you're just going to go out there and lollygag around and sort of do your profession because, there's no like drive to be the best in your profession.
Yeah.
Like some of the just professions that are out there, like, hey, I'll just go join that and I'll be fine. But, the higher level, and I think a lot of it goes back to the education system, right? And just sort of the family atmosphere and the raising and the responsibilities and the values. We just need to sort of get back to that nucleus, and we sort of need to make education about education, reading, writing, math, all the arithmetic, the sciences, history about the country, have an appreciation for that. Get really good at that kind of stuff, because we're definitely losing the war when it comes to education process, the education standings in the world. So if we can start them young and get them, get that licked a little bit, then they'll have a great appreciation for striving towards excellence, and then we can continue to have the best doctors in the world, the best pilots, the best plumbers, the best electricians, the best garbage, whatever it is. But you're going to take more pride in that, because that's my opinion on that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I think everyone at their core, like, hey, they have their bend for things they're good at. But yeah, with handing out so many awards, it's like, well, if an underperformer can get the same award that I get for busting my butt, or maybe you are the underperformer, because sometimes I am that person where it's like, hey,
guilty.
I'm still going to get an award, and I don't need to work as hard as this guy. It devalues and motivates the people to actually get good at something.
110%.
And dude, I'm 100% guilty of that. Like, and the big thing is, it's just there's also hacks for everything now.
Right.
Dude, there's hacks for everything. I fall trapped to it so many times with podcasts and with YouTube, because you see all those videos where it's like, in 6 months I have a Lamborghini. Do you want to have a Lamborghini? Yeah, I want to have a Lamborghini.
Absolutely.
So it's like, pay this course of $4,000, and then they just hose you out of your money, and it's like, dang, I fell to it again.
Yeah.
Like, because it is that quick fix society. It's like, we don't have, and full circle again, we don't have the tenacity to stick with something. We get so bored because we're that stimulated that doing something for a very long time is very boring. And I heard this other quote where it's, nobody is jealous of, or they're only jealous of what you have. They're not jealous of how you got it.
Right.
And it's like, because it takes 20 years to get really good. Like my brother, plumber, best plumber I know.
Yeah.
But he's worked it for
That's right.
15, maybe 18 years now. And it's just like, and then I come in being a doofus some days, and I'm like, dude, I don't want to do that. Why am I as good as you? And it's like, because you
haven't worked at it.
Yeah, you idiot. Like, sometimes
that's good to hear that. I'm glad to hear that an individual, 26, right? I mean, you have an appreciation, you have a realization. So that gives me hope. I'm not some old fuddy-duddy, 45. I'm only 45. I don't think I'm that old yet, but I think that's a promising sign, you know.
Yeah.
And
I think more and more people are starting to realize that. Wake up a little bit where it's like, oh, yeah, because, and that's the thing, too, dude, I love video games. 100%.
Yeah.
I love them. I'm addicted to them, so I need to stop them.
Yeah.
I literally had to cut myself off because I was like, I'm so addicted to this stuff.
That's funny.
But there you have, it's just so, they're so stimulating, but they're not that challenging. So it's like, why would I do anything hard and that takes a lot of time when I could just go hop on this video game and get instant stimulation immediately? And the thing about it is, they're smart. Like, it's still founded around the same dynamics of a good life.
Right.
So it's like a character development. Okay, well, everything in real life, you're wanting to progress as a character. You're wanting to get better. You're wanting to get more in shape, more whatever, get more money, build a civilization. But you're doing this behind a computer. You're just getting fat. Like, dude, I literally went through that stage of just like complacency, fat. I loved it. Like, I didn't love the state, but like the video games had me hooked. And dude, I still like video games.
Yeah, well, that's okay. But you're also kicking butt in this, man.
Well, we're trying.
Like, you found a new like goal.
Yeah,
you're obviously getting after this. So kudos to you. I mean, I think that's great. We just need to get that back into the education system and just good family raising, like individuals, like. Dude, you just got to work ethic. It's all about work. That's how this country was founded, how it was built out. And trust me, we can do it again, and we can continue to strive and be the greatest nation in the world. We just got to teach the young ones.
Yeah. And I think that's something, too, where, like, now I'm going to sound like that old man, but it really is true. It starts in the home.
Absolutely.
Like, how you raise your kids. And because now, so we all know those iPad kids. And we all make fun of them because they're easy to make fun of. But at the same time, breaking it down into, I understand how a parent could give their kid an iPad.
Right.
And like I'm going into the season of parenthood, but for a long time it's like, I would never do that. And it's like, dude, I'm so freaking naive. Like, shut up. Like, dude, you're low on sleep. You and your wife, if the kid was fussy, now you guys might be, hey, have this. We can have silence and just like relax. 100% get why you do that. And that's the thing where it's like, I think it's just being honest and like not saying, hey, we're not above that. Like, I can see how you would do that, but we're going to try our darndest to not be that, because yes, it will be easier in the moment to do that for the child or do that for me, but in the long haul.
Yeah.
And I think we've just lost sight of the long haul.
Yeah, and especially after COVID, right? Because everybody thought they were going to die.
Yeah.
You know, you were going to go outside and you were dead.
Yeah.
Basically, you know, the kids here in Pennsylvania, like, you couldn't go play on the playground. They had them taped off because you were going to die if you got on a playground. But now, full circle, all the reports are coming out in the last week, like, the masking was not scientific.
Yeah.
It all came out of a lab in China. Wow, what do you know? So anyways, not to get on that tangent, but like, everybody thinks the world's going to end tomorrow now. Well, it may.
Yeah.
But guess what? You don't have that decision. The good Lord above has that decision-making ability. So you just better be prepared. But don't live your life like it's going to be your last day necessarily. Put some long-term objectives out there and some goals.
Yeah.
And see if you get to it, because you're going to appreciate that a heck of a lot more than you would if you're going to try and do everything half-ass every single day.
For sure. So, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I can say that's what it is because that has been me, and that continues to be a struggle where it's like I can divert back to that, where it's just like, meh, like whatever.
Yeah.
And then something that hit me where I think something too, we as a society praise the youth, which is a good thing. Like, we're like, oh, like, find your youth, get Botox, do all this stuff. I'm not against any of that per se. But I think what happened
Your lips haven't moved in like a half an hour.
Yeah. My whole face, just no expression. I just got an injection today.
Good for you.
No, but it's this. be young. And I had this own realization in my own mind. I'm 26 now. For a long time, I still thought, I was like, I still feel like I'm 18. I still act like I'm 18. And then it's like, oh, nuts. I'm not 18.
Yeah.
And I've been acting like an 18-year-old for now 8 years. No wonder I've got nowhere in life. Like, no wonder this. Oh. And I think it's, we praise this in like this youth, which, hey, the youth is a great thing. But also, too, getting older is a good thing. You develop more responsibilities. And that just hit me like really hard. I was like, oh, no wonder I'm not like, and it's a weird little mind thing. Like, I didn't think it was that substantial. But then when I actually thought back on it, I was like, I think that actually carries a lot more weight than I thought it did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you really got to appreciate it. So my biggest recommendation for you with the family, you know, you got a child on the way, which is awesome.
Hit me with it.
Like, I still like kick myself in the butt. My kids are only 6 and 8, but I'm like, man, they are going to be out of the house potentially in 10 and 12 years. I can't believe this is taking place. Work hard at what you want to do, but I catch myself doing, I'm guilty so much now of not taking a little bit of time to spend with the kids and just sort of like put that memory into their fold, like going down the road. So that's my biggest regret. And I'm trying and working on that because I still have plenty of time with them as young kids before they depart and, you know, flock out of the house and everything else. But that would be my biggest recommendation is do exactly what you plan on doing as far as raising them, but also take the time on the times that your child or children or several children or however many you have come up to you and say, hey, Dad, you know, come do this with me. Like, just put down like what it is you got going on at that point and then focus your attention on them.
And it like in that moment, it will always feel like an inconvenience, but it will be, dude, I've heard
it'll be worth it down the road.
I've heard so many guys say that. And like even my own childhood, like with my dad, like busy dude. And like, I don't hold it against him at all because I totally understand. Like, it's like, man, I like even the stuff now where it's like I'm working on this. Yeah. And now I have a full-time job. Now I'm working on the podcast. And it's like, if you're not intentional, dude, your wife takes a hit because it's like,
oh yeah,
hey, honey, like I have this, and she understands. And two, we're broke Americans, so it's like we're trying to just survive. So it's just like, hey, we need to make some money. I'm gonna work more. Two, and it's out of that good place of like, hey, I want to provide. I want to give you a good life.
Yes.
But it's like if she has a great life and I'm not in it, how good is it?
That's
I'm
right.
not saying that I'm arrogant, like I'm the best.
No.
But it's like we've married each other. We committed to each other.
That's right.
If I can give her all these material things, but I'm not there to enjoy these things with her, well, then what the heck's the point of it?
I agree, 110%.
And I catch myself doing that all the time. Like, dang it.
Yeah.
I'm freaking working late again.
I know. I mean, I'm guilty of it too with my wife at home. You know, it's every once in a while she has to remind me and just to engage with her a little bit more, right? Because it's all about the conversation that we're having, right? We'll walk away from this conversation. I'll be like, man, I just had a conversation with a gentleman I didn't know at all, but it was a productive conversation.
Absolutely.
We talked about some cool topics. We happen to agree on a lot of things, it seems like, but if we didn't happen to agree, it was still going to be a great conversation. That's all what the human interaction is all about.
Yeah, is for sure. And I feel like it's so much easier to do that with a new and exciting person because they're new, they're exciting. What's going on in their life? Right. And then you need to be way more intentional because your wife and you have been in a relationship for a long time. And it's like, oh, no. It's like, no, I need to put more thought into this because I know her so like intimately.
Yes. Don't just assume that she's not going to want to hear what you have to say. She may be more interested than you thought.
I know.
I'm so guilty. Like I come home from work and now I'm not flying as much. I'm like, oh, well, does she really want to hear about my PowerPoint, my email that I put together today? Yeah. Like probably, maybe she will. Yeah. Like it could strike a conversation on a topic and, you know, that's what sort of helps with the conversation between you and your wife.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And most of the time it's just, I married a great woman, and even if she doesn't want to hear about it, she wants to hear about what's going on in my life.
Right.
And it's like,
that's great.
Dang, you're good.
Good. Like, there you go. Looks like you lucked out and found a good one.
Oh, I did. Good. Absolutely. And then still being a stupid human, sometimes you still take it for
That's
granted.
right. Well, we're all at fault for that, so good deal.
Good deal. Awesome. Okay, let's go into the Lifeline thing, because I do want to hear, we are clipping up on your time here.
Yeah,
though.
sounds good.
So, how'd you get from the flying the president to then flying the sick and needy?
Yeah, right. So finished up my tour in flight school in Pensacola. Was getting towards the end of the military obligation. Looked into the airlines because that was a big pathway if you went...
Like commercial?
Yeah, like commercial airlines. I looked into that because it was sort of the thing to do. You went down to flight school, you logged a bunch of hours in this fixed-wing aircraft. You had what the airline sort of needed to go do this the transition. Went and interviewed with one of the companies, one of the regionals, and just sort of felt like it wasn't the mission that I wanted. It was sort of like, for a lack of a better, you're just sort of moving cattle.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be mean about it, but I mean, point me in the direction and go from point A to point B and listen to a bunch of people complain about it. Because it is expensive to fly. And it gets tighter and tighter every year, the seats somebody get on board. So came back, had a sort of a realization there while we were still living in Florida. I'd always known about Lifeline. Got hopped on LinkedIn, tried to reach out to some contacts, shot a resume downrange to the current director at that point, Tim Cargis, who was the current director. He'd been here, just left a year ago after 26 or 25 years.
Gotcha.
I had served with a guy, rewind a few years, back at Marine Helicopter Squadron 1, Ken O'Connor, and we had a conversation, became, buddies. We're sitting around duty one night, and his wife's from Pennsylvania, and they were looking, he was close towards retirement, and they were looking to move up towards Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And this is several years ago. I was like, oh, there's this helicopter outfit, Lifeline. Just had mentioned to him, talked it up a little bit, told him about Central Pennsylvania. All right, so pause there. Don't talk to Ken for X amount of years. I put the resume downrange. Director at Lifeline sitting up on duty one night, reads his LinkedIn, sees this resume, opens a resume, starts reading it. Well, what do you know? Ken happens to be sitting next to him.
No way.
Because he just got on board a couple months prior, and Tim is like, hey, do you know this knucklehead Brice Sanders? And he was like, no freaking way.
That's awesome.
So that day I get a text from him. He's standing in front of the helicopter in his blue flight suit. I'm like, what a world.
That's so cool.
So long story short, I come up here, hadn't flown a helicopter in 3 years because I was down at flight school flying fixed wing. So I said, hey, I need to get my ATP, air transport pilot. They were looking at that. I need to wiggle the sticks in the helicopter a little bit more. Came up here to Lancaster Airport, got on board. We're under a little Schweitzer 300, which is a little like B helicopter that, very small.
Yeah.
Went and plugged about 4 hours just to refresh myself in a helicopter, and then did a check ride the next day, had an interview with Lifeline, accepted me on for the position, and then, returned back to Florida. Sunny, beautiful Florida as the crow flies, maybe half a mile from the beach. My wife loved it. Yeah. We had kids. And I said, honey, do you want to move back to Pennsylvania?
Want to go up to the cold?
Right. And I said, well, you'll be closer to your family, and I'd be closer. To be honest with you, if our kids were in middle school or high school, we probably wouldn't have made the move, but they were very young, and we are very, foundationally as far as like family values and stuff like that. We thought, man, this would be more appreciated for the family to be all sort of in a closer proximity. So that was a big driver. And it was also that I had a position at a very cool job. Yeah. So moved up, did the training. And then, and the other wicket this was the spring of 2020, so it was COVID.
Yeah.
So, like, first day I walk in, it was like, it was funny. I referenced Florida. It was Florida Freedom during COVID. It was Purgatory, Pennsylvania. Because really, the first day I walked into work at Lifeline, I didn't have my mask on. I didn't see anybody with a mask on. And we do a brief every morning, and I turn my head to the corner, and there's like 6 people with a mask on. I'm like, is the ink still dry on our house that we just sold down in Florida? Because my wife came up a couple months later. We're going back. I mean, fortunately, we're still married, but I thought there was a few knives in my back there for the first year or two. But it all worked out. I've been there now for 4.5 years. I was flying out of Carlisle, but the director position was sort of advertised out there from our previous director, hey, I'm going to be hanging up here at this amount of time. Any of you guys interested? I thought, well, if I'm going to be here for long term, show some interest. Move bases from Carlisle over to Hershey, which is where the director's based out of. My wife ended up moving. She spent a year teaching over on the Eastern Shore, East Pennsboro, and then she ended up getting the gifted K-5 position at Hershey Elementary.
Cool.
So she's doing that now. Really enjoys that position. A little different dynamic. It's more. It's not so much straight classroom teaching. It's working with some of the more involved parents and students.
Okay.
So she enjoys that. So it all worked out. Came full circle. Kids are happy at school, and she's enjoying teaching. And then I took over the director role back in April, and I guess I've had it, going on 3/4 of a year now.
Nice.
So yeah, it's been a really good ride. I've enjoyed. There's some challenges to it. I mean, not everything is, like you say, like rainbows and roses all the time. There's a lot of different different situations as far as personalities. We're all good, big family there at Lifeline, and that's really a big sticking point, a selling point to our organization, because we are sort of Central Pennsylvania specific. A lot of people are born and raised here in the area, especially on the medical side of the house, but the pilots have been around on board for a while. So when we go forward, and I'm looking for future individuals, I really want an individual that has some buy-in to the community, that's looking to give back to the community, maybe has a young family that they want to raise, because this is sort of my PR type of hat that I'm putting on. But I mean, we are based out of Hershey, and you've got Hershey Entertainment Resorts, you got Hershey Chocolate, you got the Milton Hershey School, you got Lancaster County, you got even York County, just some beautiful areas.
Yeah.
I mean, just awesome. God's country, you know what I mean? But a lot of people don't realize that until they actually get here and sort of see it off, in firsthand experience. So that is the tough sell point sometimes that we've run into roadblocks on, as far as like, trust me, it's a beautiful area here in Pennsylvania. You just need to give it a chance.
Oh, yeah. No, and there's a statistic. I don't know where these pools come from. Yeah. It's like, there's got a pool. It's like, I don't know where this came from. But like, Pennsylvania is one of the highest percentage places in America to retire.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing, and it is good for. I mean, it's just, there's so many things and opportunities and outdoor activities, and really, I mean, outside of like the cities, there's a lot of good family religious value and just beautiful countryside and good food, fresh food, good raising, good schools. So there's
just so much to do. Like in 4 hours you can be to Pittsburgh. In an hour and a half you can be to Philly. You can be to the beach in 2.5 hours, depending on traffic. You can be to the mountains. You have all 4 seasons. Like, you get a nice winter, you get a very nice summer though.
You can be to Roots in like 15 minutes.
Yeah. Get a milkshake down at Roots. Go buy a cow
that's it.
or a
that's
chicken
what we
at
took.
the small animal
We ended up
auction.
getting chicken. We got a couple acres on our property that we bought up in we're in the Palmyra area. And, of course, we'll get chickens, and we'll get bunnies, we'll get bees, and, so I think 5 of our chickens got killed because we weren't doing it right with the coyotes and the foxes and stuff. So we learned that. 2 of our bunnies died. One dug itself out, and then I don't know what happened to it. And the other one, I think it must have gotten injured on the inside, because I came out the one morning and it was just frozen stiff. So we have 1 remaining now. So we're good with that.
Yeah.
We do have a nice flock of bees, or a hive of bees.
Really?
That we did get some honey out of this year for the first time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's been cool. Our little kids have bee suits, so they're loving that.
No way.
So the honey's really good. So we've got our own little, like, what do they call it?
Homestead?
A little homestead.
Yeah.
I'm a gentleman farmer.
Yeah.
I'm not a full farmer by any stretch of the imagination.
But I'll put on a straw hat.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's all worked out really well, and we're really happy where we are with our lives right now.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, Hershey area, that's a beautiful.
Yeah.
Lancaster County is just
Lancaster's
very nice.
gorgeous.
And 2, you get outside of Lancaster, and you actually start realizing how much pride people have in their home, their landscape, and everything. You get outside, it's like, dude, this looks like riffraff out here. Like, there's some beautiful properties around here.
Absolutely.
And even the drabby ones still have great landscaping generally. It's like, whoa.
Yeah, I would definitely be, I love living in the countryside. I still like the coastlines, and I like the beaches, because a lot of our duty stations were around there, but... maybe one day. Well, I mean, Navarre is beautiful down Navarre, Pensacola area, which is closer to Alabama than anything else. Just a beautiful area, but we're blessed to have what we have here in Pennsylvania, and sort of leading the lives that we do right now.
Absolutely, so, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, that was good.
Cool.
So.
What a way to end it out. I think. Yeah, right there. We're at an hour 40, so I apologize.
Cool, man.
We went a little bit long. But thank you.
I didn't even need a drink. I didn't get parched.
I know.